If
Yeah.
your forecast requires any type of interpretation, or you have random spreadsheets that need to be explained, that's not a forecast at all. That is just a
Yeah.
negotiation.
Welcome to a new episode of Revenue Architects. This podcast is tailored for revenue leaders navigating the evolving landscape of sales, RevOps, and revenue management. Today, we have a special guest, Jelena Arnold, revenue operations leader with 15 years experience designing and scaling end-to-end revenue operating systems in high-growth B2B SaaS companies. Jelena, welcome to the show.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. You said a lot about my background, and I'm going to talk to you about how I ended up in RevOps, but it really shaped how I work as an operator. And it really comes down to four specific things that built up my entire framework, which is
Mhm.
a decision system, translation, which I'll probably talk about a lot, adoption, which is one of the topic I'm going to be talking about at RevOps AF next month, and then
Mhm.
integrity. So all of those things were really shaped by my very nonlinear path to revenue operations.
We love the
Um,
nonlinear path. Yeah, tell us all about it.
yeah, I think I'm not abnormal here when I say I did not plan to go into RevOps. But the sequence in which I got here was really important to me building that framework I just mentioned because it really shaped my entire view. I got out of college. I worked in marketing. So I'm, doing marketing on the lead generation side. And then I worked in financial sales, but I started in SaaS doing cold call sales. So we're talking about a time when there's paper opportunities, high
Mm.
volume sales. I'm doing 100 dials a day. They're showing us Glenn, Gary, Gunn, Ross on our break. So it was the whole intense sales thing. So that clearly was not for me long term. I'm not a cold call salesperson, but that taught me something that really I use it every single day now. That is the core of how I operate as a revenue operator because now I actually know what motivates a salesperson, what
Mm.
they care about, what they will not care about, and completely tune out. Those are things that you can't really learn just from a dashboard or by working adjacent, by really
Mm.
sitting in their shoes for that long period of time. That gave me that insight into how you actually get things adopted. And then from there, I moved over to client operations. And that's really where I started my leadership career. So there, I'm owning expansion and retention. And I got to see exactly what happened after a deal was closed.
Mm.
So I got to live in all of the consequences of all those promises that were made during sales, but they didn't end up in the contract or they weren't communicated to the post sale team or just every handoff that broke. That was something that I had to deal with. I saw all these customers, they're churning, and it's a surprise because our sales motion was not matching the delivery that we were doing on that post sale side. So the combination between working in marketing and then working in sales and then working on the post sale side, I got to see that full entire go to market journey, which gives me this ability to just naturally translate what those teams mean. I'm
Yeah.
not going to ask sales to care about something abstract. They're just not
Mhm.
going to care. They don't care about leadership visibility. What they care about is making their jobs easier. I know that a CSM is doing a lot of hidden work to hit their quota and their numbers that nobody actually knows about. And really, it's not just about retention for them. It's how can you cut down on some of that manual work that isn't actually changing their paycheck and their quota.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love what you
and
said
then
about the consequences. I'm sorry, that's so funny. As a CS, you dealt with the consequences. And Jay, I mean, I always love the idea that Jay, coming from a technical background, his idea of the hardest 3 years of his life was full straight sales. He thought it was easy. And then
I believe
right,
it.
Jay?
Oh
You jumped
yeah,
in
oh
and you're
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I thought this was the easiest job.
I think it is the hardest job. Sales is the hardest job on planet. And there is a lot of people say there is a lot of science to it, but I believe there is little science and lot of arts to it because you're dealing with a person and every person is different in this world. Even though you have 7 billion people, there might be little common trends, but every person is different, motivated differently, trying to solve different problems. So I think that's where I felt it is a little harder job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's being able to read people. It's so mentally taxing. Having
Yes.
worked on that post sale side, there's a lot of, oh, sales gets paid more. It's so much easier. That's the easiest job. And communicate to them, it is absolutely not the easiest job. Do you know how hard it is to be told no all day, every day? That will wear on you mentally. So just understanding that motivator from each department really, I don't know, just gives that full picture. And then and jumping back into my origin story, I was a journalism major. So, not
Wow.
business, not finance. I was going to be a journalist at a newspaper back in the days of print journalism. And that obviously did not happen. But again, I'm so glad that I did that because the one that taught the stress, the deadlines, the high pressure, that is B2B SaaS. And then two, how to really ask questions and like
Yeah.
Yeah.
dive,
Yeah. Yeah.
dig in because everybody in RevOps knows that usually the thing people say is the issue, is not the actual issue. They say they data's bad, but you
Oh,
have to
yeah. Oh,
dig
my.
in. You got to figure out what they're actually saying and
Yeah.
dig into
Mhm.
questions. So being able to like quiz people in a non-interrogative way,
Mhm.
that skill has come in handy a lot for me. Really, what that comes down to is when I'm designing a system or company, I'm not designing on how they should work. You can have a perfect system on paper. It's easy to
Right,
do.
right.
You have to design a system on how people actually behave, not how they should behave, what they're
That's a brilliant
actually
point.
going to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It- yeah, so it's
Yeah.
being able to do that's really the big thing that I think that background of going through that full journey allows me to understand what will actually work in practice.
I think it's also true. I've done a lot of culture work, and the way I have come to understand culture is that it's what people tolerate and expect in execution. This is how we do things. So
Mhm.
you can have two companies selling the same thing in two completely different ways, and both can be successful. And your RevOps not aligning to the way that these people are executing will not get you what you want, even if it's a better system, because they won't adopt it, right? They will just, I execute this way, and that's just the way it is. So there's a balance of going, yeah, I need this data, but I also need you. I need to follow where you're going because you obviously are making this successful. Let's just catalyze that
And
as opposed
they're the
to obstruct
ones
it and change the way you're doing things. And if you
they're
try
the
to
ones
tell
that determine
salespeople, yeah,
if it works or not, ultimately.
yeah, totally.
I have a very different question. Based from where you come from, right? Being a journalism major, plus going through the entire journey of financial sales, customer retention, how do you look at RevOps differently than the conventional RevOps that everybody knows?
I think that's a great question. And most people in RevOps focus on the system and
Mhm,
making sure that everything is designed perfectly. And it's all about visibility and predictability, which obviously you need. But
mhm,
if you're not taking account into that person's behavior, the behavior and personality traits of each person, you're probably not going to be successful because
mhm,
ultimately, I think that's where a lot of revenue operators tend to fail is they want to design and enforce through just compliance. Just based on the data, you should be doing this. If you
mhm.
tell a story through data the exact same way to all of those teams, they don't care. They're most likely not going to do it. So I
Right.
think one of the biggest things that really shapes my view is the fact that you're selling RevOps is an internal sales role. Like ultimately, that's what we're doing. It's the designing of the systems, the easy part, but getting everybody aligned and everybody to agree on the one goal, the shared definitions, and doing that in a way that they can understand in their language. I think that's really the heart of what determines success.
Yeah, if I twist it a little bit, like honestly, you can't go across each person's behavior. It will become very difficult to do it. So, are you saying that you want to look at some top performers and you also want to look at a sales culture, what Steve touched upon, and tune your RevOps towards that sales culture, which is more acceptable and adoptable than trying to just talk through data? Is how you are
Yes.
saying it?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think you have to loop in, you have to bring in like a champion, or as you say, a top performer, an influencer, not the whole team. You're not
Yeah,
trying to
correct.
accommodate everybody on the team. So that's a good call out. Is just the person who's the most influential on that team, usually top performer, the one that all the other reps are going to follow if they're doing it. And if
Yeah.
you can get that top performer and you can solve an issue for them, what's their biggest pain point? Just something small. It doesn't have to be a massive thing.
Yeah.
Solve a pain point for the team. Now you're building trust with them. Now they're going to be more likely to follow along with the system that you have. But really, I think you have to get their opinion and you have to understand how they would accomplish that, because leadership may determine what we need to do and what our goals are, but the front line determines, is that going to be executed or not? Is that worth it for
Correct.
them to care?
Yeah.
So it's aligning those. So I very much believe you have to work top down from leadership, but also bottom up. You have to work with those top performers and get them bought in on the plan right from the start, not at the end. You're not enabling them and then saying, we're launched, everyone do it. We're going to do it through compliance. You need to get that like internal buy-in. They should feel ownership in the system that you're building.
I've seen it where the companies do like, if you get these wins by solving a problem, but then you're also trying to help them gain perspective. And I heard this actually at a RevOps conference. It was actually a go-to-market specialist. She was like, if you put good data in as a salesperson, marketing will give you better leads. And it was so simple just to think, you give them more data, we're going to find more like that. And I was like, that's everything a salesperson. So like, I'd have to actually be in the willingness to hear the influence of another leader going, if you just do X, this will get you what you're asking for. You just have to give us more data. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting. Like you build with the win and then you build the credibility for them to listen. Then you get them to take action voluntarily. And then it just keeps growing and growing. So
absolutely.
speaking of growth, you've seen what happens when a company is growing strong and then it suddenly just misses revenue. And no one can really find data to explain why. So what does good forecasting infrastructure actually look like to you? And what's the one thing most teams skip that comes back to haunt them?
I think most forecasting problems aren't data issues at the core. They're usually definition and ownership problems. Granted, we all have messy data. Like I think that's a given. That's not the core issue. It's the definitions and ownership problems, because if you're missing a target and nobody can explain why, that's not just a reporting failure. That's usually a sign that nobody was aligned in the first place, that they all had a different definition of what drives revenue. Everybody's working from a different version of the truth. Like, for example, I've been in a company where one team had one monthly recurring revenue number and the different team had a different one, and then a different team had a different one, and then finance had to manually calculate all of that to get everybody aligned. And that caused about a 2-week latency in us being able to action on signals that we had in the system. So when we fixed that, it wasn't just the technology update by adding in an automation. It was really changing who owns that and why we're doing it and making sure that we're all aligned on those definitions. So I mentioned in the beginning about the decision system. That is the core. You can get to adoption and all this other stuff. But if you're not defining what matters, what is an actual revenue signal, you're
Yeah.
just spinning around
So
forever, because I think that's the thing teams skip the most.
can you
Go
give
ahead.
me an example of what you considered a revenue signal that somebody typically missed in the past?
So I think the biggest thing is that people don't agree on what a revenue signal is. So, for example, I've worked at a company where sales and marketing were convinced meetings booked was the signal that we could use to determine our future. And then we have a lot of product signals as well, where there's stuff that our clients are doing in the dashboard that indicate expansion, that could easily indicate whether they're going to churn or if they're likely to give a referral. So our post-sale team thought those were the best revenue signals, and that was where we needed to focus. Sales said that was not where we needed to be focusing. Meeting book would flow through down the line. So really it came down to the fact that nobody agreed, and we needed to go back to the data to figure out what actually influences revenue, not what people assume, what actually is done in place. Because I think a lot of teams too, they make this mistake of focusing on things that are lagging indicators, like pipeline. But by the time those things show up on the forecast, it's already too late. You need to have signals that are going to give you the opportunity to actually make a change. So overall, again, comes back to the definitions. And then I mentioned translation because, again, meetings booked may be important for sales. And that obviously may come down the line of translating into more revenue. But we need to communicate what does influence revenue in a way that CS, sales, and finance will understand. At risk or the committed status or whatever, those all need to mean the exact same thing. Because if you're having these pipeline meetings every week and it requires interpretation or explanations or a spreadsheet, you are not working off a forecast. That is a negotiation document.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. If you're not working off a spreadsheet, wait, say that one more time. Just go do it. Say it again for me.
If your forecast requires any type of interpretation, or you have random spreadsheets that need to be explained, that's not a forecast at all. That is just a negotiation.
Love it. Thank you.
Okay. I want to come back to your adoption and influence, because you spoke about saying that RevOps is fundamentally a sales job, right? Empathizing, speaking with people's language, and guiding them through the solutions. So my question is, what's your playbook for building a real adoption?
So I think overall my playbook is pretty simple, because really sales ops or RevOps is an internal sales job. Like I'm really not saying a metaphor there. Like that is the core job description. When you are building systems, you are essentially building a new way of working for people that didn't ask for it. They don't need a new way of working. So that's the core. Leadership knows we need a new system, but they don't. They already have a full-time job. So in the end, you have to show them value immediately, but they will circumvent you and work around you. And now you're in a system of workarounds and spreadsheets and complicated automation. My playbook really comes down to what I mentioned before. You start with those top performers and the influencers, the ones, and you solve something easy for them. What is a quick issue that's just hurting them? How do you just get a visible win? You need to show proof, visible proof, and social proof within the company that RevOps is there to make your job easier. You got to get that buy-in. And a lot of teams make the mistake of trying to get that trust by saying yes. When sales ask for, hey, can we do this? I can absolutely do that for you. Let me do it. Thinking of themselves as sales as the client. But saying yes doesn't build trust. You're actually just going back to the exact same place you were before, because most likely your backlog is getting bigger and nothing is changing for sales on a day-to-day basis. So again, you just got to get those quick wins. And overall, I really believe that adoption is a value problem. And that's what you need to solve first. I talk about the translation piece, and I think overall, that's where a lot of revenue operators just overall struggle the most is how do I actually communicate this in a way that would prompt sales to change their way of working or prompt CS to change their way of working. I know all operators understand the data, but that translation piece is hard. So one of the things that I've done in the past is I've taken meeting transcripts and put them into an AI and ask it
Oh
to
yeah.
translate what that person was saying. So I actually created a prompt that you would run after every heated meeting, any meeting where, you've got all these go-to-market teams. It's what might happen is everybody's leaving the room with a different idea or a different thought of what the end action item is. And RevOps' job is to make sure that all of those are aligned. So what I've done to make it a little bit easier on the translation is create a prompt where I take that meeting transcript, put that into a Claude or a ChatGPT or something like that, and have it spit back out what is sales trying to communicate? What is CS communicating? What are they actually saying? And then how to communicate that back to them, and then how to communicate that to other departments as well. So
And
that is
I
something I
really,
can share.
oh, yeah, I think you should, because what really stuck with me, you said it very uniquely, saying that adoption is a value problem. So if you are able to provide value, adoptions will happen.
Yes,
So if you can just take
absolutely.
that single metrics and actually implement it, saying that what is the, because I'll tell you, a few hours back, we were on a SDR call, right? And they were showing us everything they do. Everybody's working hard. But then we suddenly noticed that everybody has their own Google Sheet or Notion list or something through which they work. And
Mm,
I said, what is this? Oh no, I do this because this is simpler. Now that is the value for that person, right? Whether it's Notion or Google Sheet, but I think system is missing something. So the adoption is not happening, I think, because it's not able to produce that value to them. That is a very nice way of looking at it.
yeah, I think a lot of the time adoption, it is not a user problem. It is a system design failure. And I think a lot of people assume it just comes down to it's user error, it's user error. But if they're not doing it, why?
Yeah.
There's probably a reason why that's not the right system. So that's usually something that you should prompt RevOps to reassess what we're doing.
And one of the things we love talking to that front line, right? To literally show us, even though some of their bosses were sitting there, and it's just show us what's working, what's not. And usually they find the data, it's just all over the place. They're looking at five
Mhm.
different systems. They're trying to just way. They're creating their own things to solve problems. And so they're doing it. It's just there's your RevOps system is why can't we find all this data quickly? Because this
Mhm.
literally is what they're using to do their job. So how do we not make that easier for them is the mindset.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
data's usually there. It's just how do you get it into one
correct.
place?
Correct. Yeah. So let me ask you though, you've been in sales ops, rev ops for quite a while. And every once in a while, a company hits some sort of inflection point. And
Mhm.
so when that happens, and specifically, usually what goes from sales ops straight into rev ops, when they start to understand that they actually need this, what can you tell people who are companies that are still running sales ops that it's time to move beyond an order taking system of how sales ops is
Mhm.
run into moving into more comprehensive revenue management?
Really, I think the inflection point comes pretty quick. There's a lot of companies who are meeting their goals, they're growing because most of the time their systems aren't in place, but effort is able to overcome their lack of systems until it doesn't. All
Yeah.
companies are going to reach a point where human effort can't outpace a lack of a proper system. It's going to hit where you just don't meet your quota. And then
Mhm.
leadership is going to say, why? And start asking very basic questions. And you can't answer them because you can't get that data across the full go-to-market cycle. It's not that they're even asking these sophisticated, complicated questions. It's you stop missing your goal and now you can't answer any questions, and leadership realizes they don't actually have the visibility they need to make decisions in order to scale that business. So that's really the point where sales ops isn't enough.
Okay.
You have to go beyond that. And for sales ops is usually running just as intended, where they're very reactive. They're responding well to sales. Sales probably likes sending stuff over to the sales ops team because they get a yes. They're tracking pipeline,
These people hear me, but that's it.
They might feel heard, but nothing's changing.
Correct.
It's just their order taking for sales. So if you as a company do not have visibility into that full revenue cycle, you literally do not have the ability to make enough decisions to scale that business. Without RevOps, one function does not have the ability to see everything.
Sure.
So really, there's no other way to grow and scale without it. And really, I think in order to be successful, to go from sales ops to RevOps, you got to do two things in parallel. Leadership needs visibility and predictability, like I said. And then frontline, again, needs to have their job be easier, not harder. And if you're only focusing on one of those, if you only focus on leadership or you're only focusing on the front line, everything's going to fall apart and you're right back into sales ops. And it's just sales ops over and over again. You just have a fancy name. So really the key is making sure that you're focusing on both of those. And then you need to focus extremely hard on integrity, because I think that is really where RevOps starts to fall apart.
What do you mean by integrity? What does that look like?
For me, I think that's holding the system in place. So that base work of that decision system, it's not allowing those exceptions. And
Gotcha.
This deal is different. Let's just make this just this once. Just this once. We'll change it. Just this once. Or this is special. We won't do this again. This is a one-time thing. And then pretty soon, all that work and all that adoption and all that decision framework you have has been eroded. And now you're back to spreadsheets and workaround and a lack of visibility. So that's really where it's all this stuff that you have to do. But really at the end, it's not just making sure that your system is set up to scale. It is protecting that system very tightly.
That's interesting. Yeah. One of the reasons Jay and I really got working together years ago was that we both understood that frontline adoption is a direct translation to executive visibility. Because if you get good data and people are using it, you can understand what's happening. And so when we build systems and intrinsically with that in mind, and it's why we often partner with RevOps, because we're trying to get to that same point. I hadn't thought about it. If you're only focusing on the front line, that's one thing, but there's a balance of figuring out, yes, we need you to do some things down here because we need the visibility for these reasons up here. So I can't just solve all your problems. I do have to solve for these as well. And holding them in tension is a good way, a healthy tension on frontline adoption and executive visibility.
And showing them that value.
Threading a little needle there.
Yeah. Anyway. No, but I will say, Steve, and showing them the value of they giving that data, how it translates into meeting their metrics, doing their job better, right? Because because if your deal is in trouble and you want help, and you don't have enough data and other things in the system, you have to explain a lot before you can get your boss or your CEO to attend a coffee with your customer, for example. So I think that is, fundamentally what really matters. But I want to move towards AI, okay, before we run out of time. Because see, last maybe 12 months, everybody was saying AI is coming. And like iPhone, everybody had ChatGPT to try at our home. But what I'm seeing last 6 months in my customer base is AI has landed. Definitely enterprises, right? It's early, adoption is early. Like people are using Claude and people are using ChatGPT. And you also mentioned you are having prompts to really figure out what exactly people said in the meeting, right? So you are structurally do that. My question is, from your, and this might be a future looking question, but from your experience of RevOps as well as the AI proficiency you have achieved, what is a AI led revenue operations? How would you define a AI led revenue operation framework?
AI is all anybody's talking about. I think, every day all
What?
I read on LinkedIn is
Yeah.
about AI. All my newsletters are about AI. I think my view of AI is pretty simple. Like when I think of AI led, it needs to specifically be doing something, not just we're using AI. It has to be improving decisions. It should be reducing time to action, or it should be able to do something that a human was not able to do and give us that data quicker. So it's really needs to have a very specific use case. So where I've really seen AI help businesses is in that signal extract revenue signals and the signal extraction. Because if you can reduce that lag, like I mentioned, 14 days down to 1 day, that makes such a impact on how quickly you can move as a business. If you're taking all of your call transcripts and having an AI filter through all of them to find patterns and signals, a human's not going to be able to do that. You're going to get value out of
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
But if you have a CRM filled with bad data and you do not have a use or you don't have a specific use case and you just add AI on top of your CRM or on top of your process, I don't think it's actually helping in that case. It's just scaling the confusion you already have. It's actually speeding up the issues if you're not starting from a baseline of having that decision system and the framework and the overall process defined. So really, if teams are just layering on AI, they're probably going to fail with it. But the
Yeah.
teams where you have success are the ones where you have a specific use case for AI and everybody agrees on how it's going to be used.
I think you're spot on because I and Steve did almost 20 plus interviews with our customers and some of our mentors and asked them these questions. And what you said exactly resonates, saying that don't worry about or don't try to boil the ocean by making your data perfect and making your systems perfect and then putting AI on top of it, right? Because that's never going to happen.
No.
We have been here. But what you said is exactly how people are really implementing AI, saying that go with the use case. That use case can be how do I increase my MQL to SQL conversion? Right? Measurable metrics. Implement that with AI, right? And that is going to now move the needle. Now you don't care about what your below data is, how it is happening, right? Because what you're now looking at is a very narrow set of data saying that what happened in the marketing, right? Am I able to validate the MQL, right? What happened with SDR? Is he able to translate that quickly so that qualification call happens correctly? And if that I can make it happen, MQL to SQL conversion is going to increase. As simple as that. So I think that's a very nice view you put in. And I think it is resonating how the market is saying that maybe what you're trying to say is an AI-led revenue framework is more built on your use cases of what you want to change rather than a generic framework, right? Saying that this is how you should do it. Is
Yes,
how you're
the
trying to say.
ROI itself isn't the AI, it's how much AI can help you move faster in your business and make your decisions faster. I mentioned like my framework, AI doesn't work. It's not a substitute for the framework. You still have to have your decision system and translate and
Yes.
adopt and have the integrity. AI is just there to get to those decisions faster. So I think
Yeah.
you also put it
Yeah.
nicely
Yeah.
too. It's not
Give you
boiling
more
the
use
ocean. It's
cases.
once.
Gives you more use cases for your decisions by being able to sort through 100 in seconds instead of 100 in a day and a half. It's the
Exactly.
same construct. Yeah, that's brilliant. All right, before we go, I want to hear about you are speaking at RevOps AF in San Francisco in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be there, but I want to hear a little bit more about what you have planned So you can tell us a little bit
Give us a
about it. Give us,
teaser.
yeah, give us a little teaser about it. And then
Oh.
before we wrap up and head out to San Francisco to say hi.
I am very excited for my RevOps AF topic. I'm specifically talking about how to turn sales operations into a functional revenue operations department and the hidden sales skills you need to do it. So,
Oh,
really,
cool.
how you can actually apply sales skills internally, where a lot of revenue operators make mistakes in how they communicate. How can you do that and actually get everybody aligned? So, anybody who attends the conference will come out with a specific playbook on how you should approach those conversations.
Nice. So winning executives so that you get to do
Yes.
more things. That's critical. Yeah. You want a budget?
Yeah.
You want to do things? You got to prove it. It's a sales
Yeah.
job. That's brilliant. I look forward
Yeah.
to seeing it. We really thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us about growing revenue management and how you're able to just navigate all those nuanced challenges and bring sales into the picture of building revenue operations. So we thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It was definitely a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in San Francisco.
All right. So for the rest of you, thanks so much for checking in today with us for this podcast. And we invite you to subscribe on YouTube, like us, and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. And we'd love to see you. We'll see some snippets on LinkedIn. Please like and share those and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until the next episode, have a great day.